Welcome to the Saturday Cadence Podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence Podcast is the heartbeat of college football. This coaching carousel is getting more wild by the week. Week 8 of the college football season is complete. Big results, big upsets, lots of teams in the top 10 lost. We're going to break that down. However, we're going to start with breaking news. We are recording this show at 2 o'clock on Sunday, so this is breaking news literally just seconds ago. Billy Napier has been fired as Florida's head coach, so we're going to lead the show with that. Welcome into Saturday Cadence. My name is Blake Biscardi. A lot to get to today on this show. Like I said, Florida is moving on from Billy Napier. That means the Florida job is now open. That means Penn State is now open. Those are the two biggest jobs available. Virginia Tech also on that list, and more openings could continue. This coaching carousel before Thanksgiving, my goodness, just buckle your seatbelts. There are conversations, according to reports today from On3, that Florida State is having conversations about Mike Norvell's future. Florida State lost again to Stanford, probably while most of us were sleeping. There's a lot that's going on across college football right now, though. NIL era, how this is going, the playoff expansion, it is win now mode for many of these teams, and they need to really set expectations. Where do we see our programs? What is good? What's not good enough? And where do we want to go? And somewhere in between those three questions is who your head coach is going to be. And you see places like Clemson and Penn State, preseason picks, top 4 teams, preseason picks to win national championships. Both of those teams are sitting at 3-4. One of them is without a head coach. I mean, you just think about the difference between preseason notions and what happens on the field. It can turn quickly. It can turn really, really quickly. And if you look back, it makes what Ryan Day is doing at Ohio State all that more impressive. It makes what Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia all that more impressive, because there is stability at those programs. But before we really get into this conversation, we need to talk about Florida and Billy Napier, because he is officially out. A disappointing last year, a disappointing start to the season this year. There were some expectations that Florida could potentially find their way to the college football playoff. That is likely not going to happen. The Gators are sitting at 3-4. In fact, it's not going to happen. They did beat Mississippi State 23-21. You know, DJ Lagway has been good this season. It's not been great. Expectations were higher. So it is fair to say for Florida that they have not met expectations going into this season. I understand that last year and this year, Florida has been dealt the toughest schedule and one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. I understand that. But there is a difference. I mean, at some point, you got to play the cards you're dealt, and you got to win football games. That's what you're hired to do. You got to get this program back to the next level, or back to the prominence that the administration and that you yourself as the head coach see the standard. And Florida, you know, maybe it's not the most wildly successful program in all of the history of college football, but the Steve Spurrier days, they saw a lot of success. The Urban Meyer days, they saw a lot of success, including 2 national championships. Florida is one of the better jobs in the country. It just needs the right coach to elevate it and to win on the national level, because Florida has been around, but Florida, since Urban Meyer has left, has really not taken that step to say, hey, we're going to compete at the top end of college football. Yes. Are they competitive? Can they pull upsets? Can they win big games? Did they sniff the playoff a couple of years ago? Sure, all those things have happened. But consistently competing amongst the top of your conference, amongst the upper echelon of college football, Florida has failed to get there. And Billy Napier was thought, hey, maybe this is going to be the guy who's going to get us there. And sure, Billy Napier did some good things. Those players played hard for him. But ultimately, he was not able to get the job done. And that is why that they are moving on from him. Florida sitting again at 3-4, 2-2 in SEC play. And if we take a look at their schedule, you know, it's not going to get really much easier. They have an off week coming up here. So now the program's going to have 2 weeks to prepare, to get itself situated, figure out the interim coach. and let some of the chips fall where they may before they play Georgia. And that game is on November 1st. Then they have Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and a reeling Florida State team. Again, that could be a game where it's the battle of interim coaches, that Florida State game. We thought that that could be a potential playing game to the college football playoff. Maybe after week one, you're like, oh, okay, that game could mean something. It really has lost its luster. Both teams now sitting at 3-4 on the season, and disappointments all around. We'll see what happens with Mike Norvell and his future. More news could be coming out. But again, as I remind you, we are recording this show mid-afternoon on Sunday. So any updates after 3 o'clock Eastern time will be included on the Thursday show this week or posted about on social media at Saturday Cadence or on mine at Blake Biscardi. Like I said, big upsets this week. There's a lot of results that we want to get to. And one of those we're going to start with is in the ACC. Louisville, they went into Hard Rock Stadium and they beat Miami as 2-touchdown underdogs. Carson Beck threw 4 interceptions in this game, and he really looked like the Georgia version of himself. He had not looked like this all season. He was not sharp. The routes were not run as crisp as he would have liked, which he mentioned in the post-game press conference. And there was some debate at whether he was deflecting blame or whether he was just saying, you know what, this is what happened and we've got to clean that up. So we're not going to read too much into his post-game comments. However, when we're looking at this game, I'm sitting here watching, and yeah, Miami has looked like one of the better teams in the country. And I still think that Miami is a good team. I also think Louisville is a good team. I think Jeff Brom, especially in this spot, when he is playing a top 5 team to pull an upset bid, Jeff Brom is one of the better coaches in America at doing that. We remember the famous Rondell Moore game for Purdue against Ohio State in 2018. Some Buckeye fans still have nightmares about that game. But Louisville sitting at 5-1, 2-1 in ACC play, now having a 2-game lead essentially on Miami in the standings. And this ACC race still involves Georgia Tech. It still involves Virginia, and it still involves SMU. So by no means is Miami maybe the best team in the ACC. By no means are they guaranteed a spot in that ACC championship game. And that's one of those things when you see conference expansion and when you see all these teams that can compete at the highest level and can compete for conference championship games. Yeah. Do you have a mulligan or two during the season to get into a 12-team field? Sure. But then you also could leave it up to chance for conference championship games because you might be relying on a tiebreaker. Not all of these teams play each other. So what happens if you have 5 teams that have 1 or 2 losses at the end of the year in conference play? Who gets to go to the conference championship game? So yeah, some of it can be left to chance. So while you do not have to be undefeated to be considered for a playoff spot in this era, you just leave no doubt when you do that. And again, it's really difficult to be undefeated. And I do think that we're going to see losses from Virginia and from Georgia Tech. And this race will sort itself out. But there's probably going to be a tiebreaker involved and some different feelings about that. So by no means is Miami guaranteed a spot in the ACC championship game. And that could be really interesting. A very interesting wrinkle for the ACC in terms of how many playoff teams they can get. Because there is belief out there that the ACC needed Miami to be undefeated heading into that conference championship game. And then win or lose, they would be in. But if they lost, that would be a guarantee to get 2. I don't know if there's a guarantee that they get 2 teams in. Because if you look at Georgia Tech, I know they don't play Georgia as a conference game. It's a non-conference game. But let's say Georgia Tech loses that game. That's a loss for Georgia Tech. Then potentially into the ACC championship game, they could lose 2 games in a row at the end of the season. I don't know if Georgia Tech would be in under those circumstances unless they can really find a way to climb the polls now. That's what Georgia Tech has to do. And I think Brett Key's doing a great job at Georgia Tech. And the Yellow Jackets are one of the more disciplined teams in the country. So again, a lot of respect for some of these teams like Louisville and Georgia Tech in the ACC. Even SMU, they've not lost a conference game since they've joined, which that was on your bingo card, tip of the cap to you. These are some of the things to think about when you're looking at these conference championship game races, the playoff picture as we get into November and into December now. We have just one more weekend of games in October, and then we get to November 1st. And the games you remember are played in November. That's just how it works. That's our rule on this show. We talk about that all the time. That games you remember are played in November. And we're going to see Alabama LSU. We're going to see Ohio State, Penn State. We are going to see many, many good games. Georgia, Georgia Tech. I'll go down the slate a little bit more as we get into November without spoiling all the coverage that we're going to have and all the big moments we're going to have the privilege of covering, some live. But I want to keep that at the forefront of your mind as you're looking at this ACC race. It's not just written in pen that Miami is going to end up in Charlotte. It's not. It's in pencil. And right now, Louisville has taken an eraser to it. Now, it can still be written in, but there are no guarantees in the Atlantic Coast Conference right now. Another upset we saw Friday night. Friday night, see, before Saturday happens, you got to look at these Friday night games now. It's tough to go on the road on a Friday night. Nebraska. Now, lots of ties from Matt Rule to the Penn State job. Was Nebraska not focused because of that? Was Matt Rule not focused because of that? We'll never be able to prove it. But it can certainly play into these notions that are floating around the rumor mill, if you will. And again, this is sourced info about Matt Rule being tied to the Penn State job. It's not a surprise to anybody, but Nebraska just looked shell-shocked in that game. Minnesota continues to own them. It was 24-6. So again, Nebraska outside playoff chances, those seem to have been slashed right there by Minnesota, because if Nebraska won out, there was going to be an argument for the Cornhuskers to make the field. I want to move down now to Alabama and Tennessee. We thought this game was going to go the way that it went, where Alabama would win the game by double digits. And when I look at Alabama and how they started the season, they got controlled at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball at Doak Campbell Stadium against Florida State in week 1. What Kalen DeBoer and his team has done since then, they have responded. They are resilient. They are playing with their hair on fire. And that offense is uber talented. Ty Simpson, one of the better quarterbacks in the country. He's got Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, and a good core of wide receivers, as well as Jam Miller at running back. When he's healthy, Alabama is a complete team. Now, how good is Alabama? How good is the SEC? These are the questions, because it looks like, wow, it's just carnage. Like, this team's beating that team, and then that one's going over here and winning this game. And it's just like, oh my gosh, everybody's good. There's 10 teams that can make the playoff. Is it possible that these, in quotes, 10 SEC teams that are in contention for the college football playoff, is it possible that it's a midfest? Or do we think there's elite teams in the SEC? This is the question. How many of these SEC teams are legit, and how many of them are a little bit fraudulent? I think Alabama, although I don't think they're the number one team in the country, but I think Alabama is closer to elite than to mid. I think Alabama is going to play in the conference championship game in Atlanta. I think Alabama may win the SEC. I picked them to go to the conference championship game in the preseason, and I like that pick. I'm going to stick with it. I believe in Ty Simpson, and I believe in that defense. Also, now Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, they've had some time to get this offense going. They've been growing and developing it week over week. They've won 4 straight ranked games. They are focused. Like I said, they're playing more disciplined football. This looks like the Alabama team we expected to see at the beginning of the season. And had they not dropped that game to Florida State, they could be ranked number 1 in the country, if not number 2. Alabama, though, they are playing a lot better. I like the Crimson Tide. That pick 6 at the end of the first half, Zabian Brown, that shifted the entire game in Alabama's favor. Now, was Alabama controlling the game in the first half? Yes. Were they winning? Yes. It was 16-7. All of a sudden, Zabian Brown picks off Joey Aguilar pretty much at the goal line and just starts going the other way. And all of a sudden, you just see that stadium explode. It was real-life stadium pulse for Tennessee. And Zabian Brown puts Alabama up 23-7. That right there was just like, boom, a dagger into Tennessee in this rivalry game. So big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games, and that's exactly what Zabian Brown did there. He took the momentum right into the half for Alabama, where their defense was reeling a little bit and they needed to respond. They needed a play. It was about to be 16-14 as time expired. Boom, pick six, 14-point swing. Ultimately, Tennessee couldn't recover from that. Did they have opportunities at the end of the game? Yes. Were they going to win the game? No. But that 14-point swing right there was the momentum shifter that put the game in Alabama's grips. Alabama was holding on to the game, but then they gripped it tight. They tightened the reins after that pick six, and Alabama took control, and Alabama hasn't looked back. And Alabama's had to go through some mud. They're sitting at 6-1, but they are undefeated in SEC play. They're sitting right behind Texas A&M at the top of the standings. The Aggies undefeated at 7-0. Georgia sitting right behind Alabama at 4-1, but the tiebreaker goes to Alabama if they get into one. Just keep that in mind because Georgia continues to win too. They're another resilient team. And that's the game that I want to get to next because Lane Kiffin had a phenomenal offensive game plan in this matchup. And you know what? They just scored and scored and scored until they didn't. And when we talked on the show, we told you Georgia starts slow. Ole Miss start fast and execute in the red zone. If you do that, that's your path to victory. Ole Miss did that. Ole Miss was scoring touchdown, 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 touchdown. Then they didn't. And Georgia's defense came alive. Georgia's defense didn't really come alive right away in the second quarter, not even in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, that final drive for Ole Miss, where they had a chance to tie the game if they scored and got a 2-point conversion. Ole Miss had 1 yard in the fourth quarter in 2 drives, 2 3-and-outs and 1 yard. Georgia scored 17 points in the fourth quarter. The resilience of Georgia. Georgia, this is not the Georgia team from 4 and 5 years ago. This is not the Georgia team in 21 or 22 with those elite defenses. This Georgia team is going to have to score to beat you. This Georgia team is going to give up some points. This Georgia team does not come sprinting out of the gate. They almost started a light jog and have to get warmed up. But if you're a good team, if you're an elite team and you can score and you can get up on them and you have a good defense that can slow them down, you can force a turnover, you can get a stop. That's the path to beat Georgia. It's doable. Alabama did those things. Alabama got up early. Alabama had a good defense. Alabama could hold on. Ole Miss could not do that. Ole Miss's defense was also Swiss cheese. Ole Miss's defense couldn't get off the field the entire game. I tweeted out that Lane Kiffin was doing anything you wanted on offense. Ole Miss was doing anything it wanted on offense. And then I quoted the same tweet. I said, update, so was Georgia. Georgia's doing whatever they want. The difference was Georgia continued to do whatever they wanted. Ole Miss stopped. That was the difference. Ole Miss stopped executing because Georgia tightened the clamps a little bit on defense. Kirby Smart and his team found a way to put the clamps on for that defense. And it was the right move. They figured out how to stop Ole Miss. And that was the adjustment that had to get made in the game where it was just going to be a shootout. It was back and forth, touchdown, 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 touchdown. Then all of a sudden, Georgia got stops. And Georgia continues to be elite at being resilient. Georgia is not elite in any other category, but Georgia is resilient. And resilience does go a long way when you get into these matchups, especially against a team that is a little bit lesser experienced or that has not seen this stage that you're playing on. Georgia, they have issues on defense. I have been saying this for weeks. That's why I picked Alabama to beat them. Georgia has issues on defense, especially in the back end. A good passing attack is Georgia's weakness. That's why Alabama saw success. That's why Ohio State would see success. Notre Dame, I think, would see success because Notre Dame's really balanced. Those are the kinds of teams that would see success against Georgia. Now, the way Georgia's schedule is shaping out, yeah, they lost to Alabama, but they beat Ole Miss. That was a game they needed to win. Florida going to be without Billy Napier. DJ Lagway, can he expose any of it, and would it even be enough to win the game? But Texas, you see Texas later on Georgia's schedule. Arch Manning and that Texas offense, they're not really doing much that jumps off the page at you where it's like, hey, that game makes me a little bit nervous. I think Georgia can figure out a way to win that game. I'm not concerned about Georgia now being susceptible in the ACC or in the SEC. I think Georgia, they need some teams to lose, but Georgia is very much in the SEC championship race. And if they get there, is it a rematch against Alabama? Can they make the adjustments? Can they slow down Marcel Reed and Texas A&M? These are the questions for Georgia. Are they going to figure out that defense before they have to face an elite offense? And here's the other thing. What if they play an elite defense? What if they play Ohio State? Just what matchups do they exploit? Because you can't start slow against the Buckeyes. It's hard to score. You need it to be a slugfest. Can it? What if Ohio State scores 21 points on you in the first half? What do you do? These are the things Georgia needs to figure out. Georgia can. They have Kirby Smart. They have good personnel. They have great players. But Georgia needs to figure it out because, like I said, this schedule is favorable for the Bulldogs. They've got Florida. They're off this week. They have Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, and Georgia Tech. If I'm looking at that schedule, I can see 11-1. 10-2 is the floor, in my opinion. 10-2 is the floor. I think Georgia could be 11-1 sitting in there. Conference championship weekend. Do they go? They need Texas A&M to lose. They need Texas A&M to lose twice to really feel good about it because they own the tiebreaker against Ole Miss. They don't against Alabama. So if it's Texas A&M remaining undefeated and they go, Alabama has to lose 2 games in the SEC for Georgia to go because of that tiebreaker. And again, Alabama, I know they have 1 loss, but reminder, that's to an ACC team in Florida State, not an SEC team. So just a key to watch. Something else that's really a great story is what Clark Lee is doing at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's in the top 10 of the AP poll. It just came out. Vanderbilt. That is what Clark Lee is building. That's what Diego Pavia is leading. And they go in and beat LSU, another team that everybody was high on, myself included, with Garrett Nussmeier. And they have also underperformed, like Penn State, like Clemson. Vanderbilt is 6-1. 6-1. They are hosting College Game Day next week against Missouri. Think about that one. Just think about it. I'm giving you the pause. I mean, this is the era of college football that we're in right now. Indiana, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt are all in the top 10. Think about that. Just think about that. That's the power of the NIL era. That's the power of good coaching. That's great culture. Last year, Vanderbilt beat Alabama after Alabama beat Georgia. And you know what? It was a big upset. It was huge. It showed everybody, it showed the Vanderbilt program that, you know what, we can play on this stage. We can win those games. And then this year, Diego Pavia was like, we want to win a national championship. We believe that we can play on that stage. Well, so far, Vanderbilt's playing on that stage. So far, Vanderbilt is looking the part. This is Vanderbilt's remaining schedule. Missouri at home, at Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, at Tennessee. 10-2 Vanderbilt, I think, is going to be in the college football playoff. We just need to prep for that. 10-2 Vanderbilt, I think, gets in. But let's go back. Diego Pavia, he only threw for 160, but he was really effective and efficient. He had the touchdown through the air, but really his legs were gashing LSU. He ran for 86 yards and 2 scores. Pavia and how he approaches the game, his mentality, his toughness, his resilience, his leadership. That locker room is completely bought in to who he is as a player, how he leads as a player, how he plays as a player. He elevates those around him. That's what's making him special. And if you look across the sideline, Garrett Nussmeier, he's not getting the help that he needs. He hasn't played that well. The offense has been a little bit shaky, muffled, unstable at times. So for LSU, yeah, you're not meeting expectations. Yeah, you're 5-2. And if we look down your schedule, LSU fans, you have got Texas A&M at home at night this week. Then you have a bye. Then you go to Alabama. That's Tuscaloosa for you, Bryant-Denny Stadium at night, most likely. Good luck. Arkansas, Western Kentucky, at Oklahoma. And remind you, I said you're 5-2. Remind you, Brian Kelly, there's some friction. Could LSU be making a move off of Brian Kelly? Could the LSU job come open? Because if the LSU job comes open, that is the best job on the market. If it's LSU, Penn State, and Florida, those are your top three jobs. LSU, far and away, is the number one job in the country right there. The elite talent pool that's there, the resources that's there, that is a win immediately place, especially with the transfer portal. And you can plug those guys in. That job would be the most coveted position in college football if it comes available. And who would make the move to go there? Who would be available to take that job from Brian Kelly should they move off of him? Because if LSU's sitting there at 8-4, I don't know that Brian Kelly survives. And now you think about this too. You lose to Vanderbilt. Now you got Texas A&M. They're undefeated. Let's say they come into your house and beat you and you go into a bye week. You're in desperation mode going into Tuscaloosa because you can't lose 3 straight. So to me, when I see that, that makes me have some pause for LSU because I almost think that they're in desperation mode this week. I know that offense hasn't looked great, but that defense is pretty good. I know it gave up 31 points to Vanderbilt. It's shown flashes. This Saturday is going to be the best version of LSU we have seen all weekend if they want Brian Kelly to continue coaching there. And that'll be the indicator. If they play for him, we've seen Florida do this with Billy Napier. They're in desperation mode. They're backed into a corner. They're going to play because he's coaching for his job. And I think Brian Kelly is coaching for his job over the next couple of weeks. LSU is going to have to give their best. If they don't, if they look flat, that might tell you all that you need to know, and a change may be coming. Elsewhere in the country, the Holy War, BYU beats Utah. That's a huge result, especially, again, in the Big 12. So huge result there for the Cougars, win that game at home. We also saw Texas almost lose to Kentucky. Texas almost lost to Kentucky. It went to overtime. They escaped, won the game by a field goal. Arch Manning has not looked great all year. Lots of hype surrounding him. Arch Manning's a good player, but Arch Manning needs to develop and grow. He's not ready to be a number 1 draft pick. He's not ready to win a Heisman Trophy yet. He needs time, and I don't think he's going to be as good as he was originally advertised. Again, he's a talented quarterback, but we got to really reset these expectations that we have done from the preseason because some of the comments that I were hearing around him, not up to par right now, the way he's been playing this year. The last thing I want to touch on before we get into the AP poll here is Ohio State. 34-0 over Wisconsin. This Ohio State team is quietly crushing their opponents. It's not flashy. It's not cute. They are absolutely making opponents look inept. The defense, Ohio State's defense, is playing out of this world. Wisconsin only gained 144 yards. 20 of those were on a 4th and 19 from your own 11-yard line on a fake punt. I know that Wisconsin's most likely moving off of Luke Fickell. I know that Wisconsin is 2-5. That's not the point. The point is Ohio State is doing what Ohio State should be doing. My other point is this defense under Matt Patricia has given up 41 points in 7 games. That is good for 5.8 points per game. You know what else? Ohio State has not allowed a first half touchdown all season. Ohio State has allowed 1 red zone touchdown. Ohio State has allowed 3 passing touchdowns. That's it. All of those marks are the best in the country. This defense lost 8 players to the NFL last year, and it's the number 1 unit in college football. And I'm not saying that off of perception. I am saying that off of sheer facts and what these boards tell me when they say 5.8 points a game, 1 rushing touchdown allowed in the red zone, 3 passing touchdowns allowed, 41 points given up through 7 games. That is the most in 30 years, or that's the best mark in 30 years for any team. It was since Florida State. back in the 90s. What else is concerning for college football? Julian Sayin finally was allowed to throw the football. They finally put more onto his plate, and we told you this was going to happen. We told you this on last week's show. We told you this in our written coverage. We've been talking about it for weeks. This Wisconsin game was going to be the game where they let Julian Sayin air it out because they've got Penn State in 2 weeks. They have a bye week this week. And then they've got Michigan sitting there at the end of the month. That's a game they got to win. You lost 4 straight. This offense is going to start humming. And they finally gave Julian Sayin enough on his plate to throw the football. And you know what? He threw for almost 400 yards, 36 for 42 for 393 and 4 touchdowns. Julian Sayin, the chemistry that he has with Carnell Tate is among the best in the country. He also has the best wide receiver in the country in Jeremiah Smith. And then for Ohio State, these running backs, Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, 2 freshmen, they look like the 2 best backs in that room. It's been by committee. C.J. Donaldson's been really effective in short yards and red zone situations. James Peoples has been okay. He could be a little bit better. But again, Ohio State, I don't think Ohio State's invincible. I just think they are not a team that you can just walk in there and say, oh, we're going to exploit one thing and we can beat them. You need a lot to go your way. But one of the things that would really help your cause if you want to beat Ohio State is make the offense one-dimensional, because the Buckeyes have struggled to run the ball at times this year. The offensive line has had some trouble blocking in the run game. Really so have the tight ends, and that's really been the catalyst. Tego Shabola has not been great, but the tight ends haven't helped. So Ohio State's got to figure that out before Penn State and before Michigan here at the end of the season. So over November, this Ohio State offense is starting to get unlocked, and we see that passing attack. Ohio State's going to turn into a pass-first team. They've been run-first this whole year. They're going to start leaning into that strength. They're going to become a pass-first offense. It will open up the run game because it's just you can't stop Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss and Max Clare. You just can't do that and commit to the run game. Something has to give. There are too many good weapons on this Ohio State offense, and you can't play man coverage against them because Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Tate had a spectacular touchdown pass in the first quarter. And then Julian Sayin just threw a laser to Brandon Inniss at the end, really, of the second half. It was late, and it was just a dime. The accuracy, the way the ball jumps off of him, it looks better than C.J. Stroud. He's been such an accurate passer. He's completing 80% of his throws. That's good for the best in the country. He now has 6 straight games where he has completed 70% or more of his passes and had 2 passing touchdowns. That's an active streak. We'll see if it continues against Penn State. But Ohio State looking like the best team in the country. And then Indiana sitting there now at number 2. And again, this AP poll. So here's the thing. We're going to look at this AP poll, and we are going to see how much it has changed since the beginning. This AP poll is about what I expected at the top. It's Ohio State at 1, Indiana 2, Texas A&M 3, Alabama 4, Georgia at 5, Oregon sitting at 6, Georgia Tech 7, Ole Miss 8. Then you got Miami dropping to 9 after a loss, Vanderbilt at 10. I want to just continue down this list. BYU and Notre Dame both surging, 11 and 12. Then Oklahoma at 13. Texas Tech falls from 7 to 14, lost the game against Arizona State with the backup quarterback. And then Missouri sitting there at 15. So that's a top 15 matchup in Nashville between Vanderbilt and Missouri this week. Virginia, Tennessee, USF, that is 16 through 18. Louisville jumps into the poll finally, ranked. Jeff Brom's squad looking much better in prime contention for the ACC. They're sitting at 19 with an inside track to Charlotte and potentially a college football playoff berth if they win the game. LSU at 20. Cincinnati and Texas 21 and 22. Illinois back ranked as they should be. That gives Ohio State 2 ranked wins now on the season. And then Arizona State at 24, following the upset over Texas Tech. Michigan, big win over Washington. Bryce Underwood looked really good, more talented, finally gave him a little bit more on offense. Michigan needs to run the football. They need Bryce Underwood's legs involved. That team responded really well after getting embarrassed in the Coliseum in LA against USC just a week ago. So that's the response you needed to see from Michigan if you wanted to have some hope. Like I said in the preseason, this is going to be a fringe playoff team. If they win out up until Ohio State, that will be a win and in situation for them in the college football playoff, sitting there at 10-2 should they beat the Buckeyes. If they lose against Ohio State, chaos could happen. Not going to rule anything out, but they will need to win that football game. We will see. They've got Michigan State this weekend at night on the road, and that game we know is weird. Trouble with the snap, all the things. We know that game is weird, so we'll figure that out on the Thursday show. But Michigan back ranked, Sharon Moore, we're going to see how this team continues to respond. Will it be a 1 week response or will this be a season-long response? Will that be the moment? Will that be the turning point, the pivotal moment that Michigan says, you know what, we're better than this against USC? They showed us one, but they got more games to go. So we're going to see how all of that pans out. But again, we got a nice slate of games coming up. Again, October has just been incredible for the sport. And again, my cap is going to be tipped to what Brett Key is doing at Georgia Tech, to what Clark Lee is doing at Vanderbilt, to what Kurt Cignetti is doing at Indiana, and what Ryan Day is doing at Ohio State. His leadership, the stability for the Buckeyes in that program. Chaos is just going rampant across the sport of college football, but there is stability in Columbus thanks to Ryan Day and his leadership. So again, it makes it all the more impressive in Tuscaloosa, Columbus, and Athens, what has been going on there. And for Texas, it's put up or shut up time for the Longhorns. We might have to start having conversations about Steve Sarkisian, but we will save that for a later episode. I appreciate you listening to today's show. Again, like I said, Billy Napier has been fired from Florida. We will keep you guys up to date. Mike Norvell potentially next on that list. Luke Fickell, I'm assuming from what I'm hearing, a move will be made after Oregon if they do indeed go in that direction. But that is the show for today, guys. We're going to have a loaded slate for you again on the Thursday show for week 9. So make sure you're staying tuned to the socials. Again, I appreciate you listening to today's show. Socials are at Saturday Cadence, at T Silver Bulletin, and at Blake Biscardi. Website, tsilverbulletin.com. Guys, we will see you on the Thursday show. Stay tuned to this coaching carousel. Keep your ear to Twitter. And guys, we will see you on Thursday. God bless.